Hi friends, this is Lauren Taylor. Thanks for joining me in my craft room, and I'm going to be sharing how I created this die cut filled spring card. I'm using the Decorative Birdhouses, and I've cut it out of some watercolor paper and some light tan brown colored paper. I also die cut the stitch birds out of some watercolor paper, and I went ahead and already hot foiled and cut out my love sentiment. I'm going to be watercoloring on my different papers today. I wanted it to give a look like my birdhouse is wooden and it's been painted. So I'm using some Zig Clean Color brush markers to do my coloring, and I'm going to be using softer rainbow colors for the different pieces of my card. So I'm using a light purple to color in these smaller details of the birdhouse, and then I will bring in a light pink to color in the scalloped details. I also will bring in orange and yellow for my little flower, which will be the birdhouse opening on my card. And then finally, I will color my bird in shades of blue, so that way it looks like a cute little bluebird that will be sitting on my birdhouse. You could also easily do this technique with alcohol markers or colored pencils, whatever coloring medium that you find is best for you. I don't use my Zig Clean color brush markers as much as I should, especially for having this 60 pack. So I just thought it would be really fun to color with these since I am using die cuts and not coloring in a stamped image for this video. But obviously, please do whatever is comfortable for you. You could even die cut all of these pieces out of different colors of cardstock, or maybe you could ink blend on them using distress oxides or dye-based inks. I will actually be doing a little bit of ink distressing once I'm all done here with my watercoloring, because again, I really want my birdhouse to look like it's made of wood. So I will grab my Distress ink pad in Vintage Photo, and I have a little brush here because I have the minis, and I'm going to be ink blending on the center circle part of my flower opening because I want it to look like it's inside of the birdhouse, so wanted to create a darker brown color. And then I'm also adding in a light touch around the center part of my birdhouse because I didn't color that in. I want it to look more like that is still kind of a wood colored part of the birdhouse and not painted. I also am just adding a little bit to all of my little detailed pieces here. I feel like I kind of grunged it up a little, but again, wanted to look more like wood. And this paper does have a little bit of a texture to it, so I think it really turned out how I envisioned it. Now, to keep my birdhouse together so I can adhere it to my card, I have this sheet of adhesive, and I just loosely trace the birdhouse on this sheet, and I'm cutting around on the inside of the line. It's not going to be a perfect fit behind my birdhouse, but I'm okay with that. I'm just using it to be able to attach another layer of the birdhouse die cut that I did out of some watercolor paper because it's super sturdy, and I want all of my pieces to be sturdy on my card. So I peeled off one side of this adhesive sheet, and I'm lining up all of the pieces of my birdhouse to one side of the sticky adhesive. So I started with the center of my birdhouse because it was the largest piece, and then I added the bottom scallop and trim, and here I am adding the roof part of the scallop and trim. Once I have that all in place, I'll just use some non-stick scissors to trim off the excess adhesive because again, it wasn't a perfect cut, but I knew it would be big enough to be able to attach all of those pieces. I'm peeling off the other side of this adhesive sheet, and this particular brand is a nice sheet of adhesive, so I can peel this off and my pieces will stay together. And now I'm adding those extra watercolor cardstock pieces that I die cut the house out of, as you saw in the beginning of this video. And again, that's just to create some nice stability behind my birdhouse. So I started with the bottom and I'm slowly building my way up to the top, making sure to line it up as best as I can behind my colored pieces on the front. If anything did stick out, it'd be really easy to trim off, so you don't need to be too careful with this, but it is nice when everything fits perfectly. So now that my birdhouse is assembled, I'm going to start adding in some of the details like my flower opening on the front of my birdhouse. I'm just using some wet glue with a fine point tip to be able to attach these pieces on. And I'm using the details on this die to center my flower where I think the opening on this birdhouse would look really cute sitting on. After I do the yellow part of my flower, I'm going to line up the orange circle on the inside of that yellow flower. And I'll repeat that same process for my little circle that I distressed with that vintage photo distress ink right into the center of my flower. I'm also going to assemble my bird. Again, I'm showing all these steps so you can see different ways of assembling the birdhouse and the bird. And so I'm going to start with gluing the belly of my bird on first. So again, just using some tweezers and some wet glue with a fine point to assemble these together. I like using wet glue with small pieces like this because it gives me a chance to have a little bit of wiggle room in case I don't get the die cut piece exactly where I want it. You'll see that here with the little beak of this bird. I use a jewel picker to pick up the piece up and place it down, and then just kind of moved it around with my fingers to make sure it was exactly where I wanted it on the die cut. I'm going to use my jewel picker again to glue down the eye of the bird, which is this really tiny small piece. So having this little jewel picker with the wax tip was really helpful in assembling this bird together. Finally, I'm going to add the wing. I don't want my bird to look like it's flying, so I want to put the wing in a way that it looks like he's just resting because he'll be resting on his cute little birdhouse. So now that my die cut pieces are all assembled, I'm going to work on my background. I have this piece of pastel mint green, and I wanted to add some really soft details to my background. So I have these hearts. This is from the layered Valentine hearts, and it's just the solid die or the solid stencil, and I believe it's the A stencil. And I'm grabbing distress ink and Picket fence and a domed foam blender and just inking those hearts through the stencil onto that pale pastel green colored cardstock. I also am adding a little bit of splatter. This is a white gold, so a very light colored, almost opalescent watercolor through the heart stencil as well. And I love a good stencil reveal. So here is what my heart background looks like. And I'm going to set it aside to dry for a little bit. And once it's dry somewhat, I'm going to kind of decide on the layout of my card. So I know I want my birdhouse with my bird resting on its cute little house and my love sentiment to be under the birdhouse. I have an A2 card base, and I was originally going to use this green background to fill up the whole card, but I wanted a little bit of a white border to show, so I'm going to trim down this background piece to be 4 by 5 1/4, and then I'll adhere that to the card base. I'm going to go ahead and use some tape runner on the back side of my green card background, and I'll adhere it to the center of my card base. Once I've glued that down, I'm going to grab some different foam adhesives to attach the rest of my elements for this card. I have some just large circle round adhesives. It doesn't really matter what you have, just use, whatever you like best to cover the back side of my birdhouse, and I'm attaching it to the center but more towards the top so I have room for my love sentiment. I'm using some smaller adhesives to glue down my little bird. I originally was going to put him towards the bottom, as you can see here, but I realized I didn't like the bird location with that sentiment, so I decided to scooch my bird up and have him sit on top of the flower opening of the birdhouse, and then my sentiment will fit nicely kind of at an angle beneath the birdhouse. I am also going to use some foam adhesive to attach this, so I'm using some 1/8 of an inch strips, which I find fits perfectly behind the shadow die cuts for these hot foil plates. So I'm just going to peel off both sides of the release paper, and that will allow me to be able to twist and bend my adhesive so I don't have to cut it a bunch of times behind the script letter. And then I added some wet glue where I knew it would overlap with the birdhouse. So now that I've attached all of my die cut pieces, I want to add a little bit of fun. So I'm using the Flower Garden Mix. These are really cute clay confetti pieces of leaves and flowers, and they also kind of have a soft look to them, and I thought it just matched the theme of this card so well. So I'm using my little jewel picker again, and I placed some leaves around my flower opening on the birdhouse, as well as some yellow flowers on the scallop trims of the birdhouse. Once I have all those in place, again, just using some wet glue and my jewel picker, I knew I wanted to add a little bit more. More is more on this card, and I love it. So I am adding some purple flowers and more leaves just around my love sentiment until I'm really happy with how they look. I even overlapped some of the leaves with the purple flowers around my love sentiment, as well as overlapping it on the L and the E. Here is a final look at this sweet little love birdhouse card. I hope you enjoyed all of the little touches that I put on here, and that maybe you learned something new about how you can use these stitched birdhouses and stitch bird dies to create a fun, beautiful spring card. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!